NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, where you been? Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, come on in.
Welcome back to your Tuesday Buckeye Talk from cleveland.com. Doug Lee Maurice, Nathan Baird, Stephen Means. Now we're talking safeties. We talked to the cornerbacks and the safeties last week. We did a cornerbacks episode. We did not give you a safeties episode yet, so we need to do that. We need to talk about Sonny Styles and Josh Proctor and Lathan Ransom and Cameron Martinez and jahad-carter. And I think the way we'll do it, guys, is just run through the three positions and see where the battles are, where we think guys stand. So, Nathan, let's start with the nickel safety, slot safety, cover safety position, which did get a little bit of a tweak on Saturday when Nathan and Stephen were at the open scrimmage on Student Appreciation Day. I wasn't there. You guys went back. I'm sure you guys listened to the Saturday pod that Nathan and Stephen did. Jahad-Carter injury on that day. I think you guys said, Ryan Day said it doesn't seem to be a long-term thing, but he's in the mix in that nickel safety spot. Cam Martinez is a guy who's typically been running with the ones. We've seen some other guys work in there. Feels like that's the battle, right? Cam Martinez, Jahad-Carter as a transfer from Syracuse, and then some of these backup cornerbacks who are now maybe in the mix to get some playing time there in certain situations. Nathan, how do we view that position right now?
I think they like Jahad-Carter of everybody in that room, and as much as they talk about, well, he's playing every position. He's the one guy that I think they like the most as being a legitimate option at all three positions. So the best version might be that if Cam Martinez comes out, wins the job, plays his best football so far, and then now that sort of makes Jahad-Carter a guy who can bounce around if needed. It was a non-contact injury during just a 7-on-7 drill. It didn't look good when it happened. He had to be helped off the field. He did then come back and was walking around, so you took some positives from that. They said they thought the knee was stable from their initial test. They were going to do some more evaluations. By the time people hear this, I don't know, maybe some word will leak out. But we'll see what it looks like on Wednesday. But the thing that we took away the most from after he got hurt was something that we had already been talking about in relation to what they were going to do with that position in terms of depth. And we saw Jair Brown get some reps there. We saw Ryan Turner get some reps there as like the second string nickel. So you saw guys from the cornerback room sliding over rather than them taking guys who were definite safety bodies and pulling them down to play that nickel spot.
But should we feel like this is Cam Martinez's job to lose, Stephen? He was the number 2 guy at this spot behind Tanner McAllister a year ago. Certainly did get some reps there, has been in the program a while. Is that how we should view this? Or the fact that Jahad-Carter just got here, is this still wide open in our mind?
Yeah, maybe it's wide open. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on in fall camp as Carter just gets more used to just being in the program. But at the same time, it feels like Cameron Martinez is now in year 4 of his transition from, we have to remember, he played quarterback in high school and he was transitioning into being a defensive back. So there was always going to be a little bit of development there. It does feel like it's starting to click for him. He had some good moments last year, but also dealt with some injuries. And, of course, that Michigan game, there's the highlight from that doesn't look very good. But as we talked about on the previous pod and what they're looking for in a position like that, they are looking for some coverage ability along with the run fit and stuff. It seems like Cameron Martinez's development has finally put him in a position where he's able to provide both of those things in a more extended way than maybe he was last year when we were thinking that maybe Tanner McAllister has the job in the beginning, but maybe Cameron Martinez comes along late.
Yeah, I definitely would not say that it's Cam Martinez's job to lose. Jahad-Carter's got a lot of experience. He was a starter at Syracuse. He's been a starter at the Power 5 level more than Cam Martinez has. So it may come down, though, to kind of what Steven's alluding to is is it the right positional fit for what they want in this defense right now? Does Cam Martinez better exemplify that? And does he, just play up to the level that they want? That's still something that remains to be seen.
So Cam Martinez has had an interesting career here in that he's a very interesting athlete and player. That feels like this guy's a football player. Feels like this guy's a football player, and they just had to figure out what to do with him. And then they really did figure out last year. But Tanner McAllister took far more of the snaps at that position. Cam Martinez was among the guys that talked last week when we talked to the secondary guys. Did you guys get a vibe? He's in year 4, right? We talk about it a lot, right? Year 3 is kind of your go year sometimes. I think when you're making an adjustment, maybe, hey, you played a lot of quarterback in high school, you're changing sides of the ball. They got to figure out exactly where you are. Sometimes it takes a little longer. It's year 4. Like this is, exactly what happened in year 9. Does he feel like it's go time? Everything like maybe has been building to this, that he is about to play his best football? Because again, I can remember, I guess it was last year, right? He started a game when Tanner McAllister was out and he played well, but then he didn't necessarily play a ton the rest of the year. Nathan, where's he at? Where does he think he is in his progression as a Buckeye?
So one thing he did give us some insight on was that he sprained an ankle week 3. I'm trying to remember which game that was at Toledo.
I think so.
Maybe week 3, and just said that never fully got right after that. That was something that kind of bothered him all season from that point. That's sometimes something guys say later, especially when they ended, as you're saying, like some of the last things we saw him do. He comes in, subs in for McAllister in the Michigan game and gives up a big touchdown. Like those are kind of some of the lasting impressions we got of multiple safeties on this team last season. So I agree with what you're saying, that, and I think we have heard this alluded to from Knowles, from the coaching staff at large. Like he's one of the guys that the time is here. Like either you can do it now or somebody else will, because they've recruited guys into this safety group that they are excited about. Now, nickel's the one that it is a little bit wonkier. And that's where Jahad-Carter's presence is most important, because if there were a long-term injury for him, that does take away their opportunities. I think they feel like they're deeper at those other 2 spots than they are at nickel right now.
So I guess when you think about the way this room is built, we're talking about Cam Martinez, we're talking about Jahad-Carter. Then when you get to the 3s, we're talking about corners sliding over, guys who are still they're not permanent position shifts. Jair Brown is saying like, hey, no, I'm doing both. So the 3rd string guys are part-time guys, right? And that's not necessarily bad, but is there a 3rd guy that we would think about, or is it really it's Carter and Martinez and then corners sliding over? That's just where this position is right now.
That's what we've been seeing. That's what we saw on Saturday. I saw Ryan Turner out there. Once Carter couldn't practice anymore, I saw Turner out there. We saw Brown out there at one point. Like those guys were rotating in. So now that maybe just be part of this ongoing process where they're wanting those guys to get more reps there. But again, I think that exposes where they are at that position and why they so badly need Cam Martinez to step up and seize it, and Jahad-Carter to make this transition and be somebody they can rely on. And
also, 3s are where you'd like to see freshmen maybe put their stamp on some things. And there's only one of the 3 safeties who are committed in this class who is here right now, and that's Malik Harford, and he's a high safety guy, either a Bandit or a Jester guy. So Jaden Bonsu, number 273 player, number 24 safety, and then Cedric Hawkins, number 355 player, number 35 safety, who committed during the Rose Bowl last year. Hawkins especially is a guy who might, you might look at this nickel safety spot as a spot for him to play. So when he does get here in June, can he maybe start to make some waves and be in the 3s? And then a year from now, we're looking at, okay, can he make his way into the 2s? But right now, it's just they're missing some guys from the freshman class who are not here. So when we're talking about the 3s maybe look light, they're having to pull guys from other spots. Yes, they're trying stuff, but also they're not full in terms of that room right now yet. which is crazy to say for a room that's already got 9 guys in it.
Yeah, no, that's well said. But for 3 spots, for 3 real spots.
Yeah.
So it is spread around a little bit. It is just interesting to double check. This is quite a gap. Jahad-Carter, college snaps, 1,765. He played 739 in 2020. And he's actually played fewer snaps since then. 2021, 483. Last year, 543. Cam Martinez has played 372 in 2 years. He redshirted in 2020, basically barely played like 1 game. That is a significant gap, but it's just interesting that in this spot, I don't know, is it just coincidence, Nathan, that this is a spot where they brought in Tanner McAllister as a transfer? Now he's done. Now they brought in Jahad-Carter as a transfer. Or is there something about this position where a veteran dude sliding in here makes sense? Or is it something about this position that they just are lacking at this spot and they've been forced to do it? They've had to go get transfers the last 2 years.
Both, but on the first part of that, it was specifically that it was Tanner McAllister, right? Like that, I think we're just bringing in some safety to play that. They're bringing in a guy who's going to come in and help this whole defense make the Knowles transition, and he did that. The fact that it was Tanner McAllister was a big deal, but I do think that they have. I don't think it. Jim Knowles said it. I tried to ask a question the other day about whether going from 3 linebackers to 2 had kind of screwed up the balance, I guess, more or less in that room and made things awkward. And he said, absolutely not. But that has happened at nickel, where they went to 3 safety positions, but they were underpopulated in terms of either safeties, not to repeat the whole pod we had last week, but safeties who were of that certain skill set, that certain body type that looked cornerish, or corners who could very easily just shift over. And then all the corners were hurt last year. So they've just needed help there. They've needed help in terms of the kind of athlete that can fit that spot. They've needed help in terms of, I mean, again, we've seen both the good and the bad of Cam Martinez. So it's time for him to just sort of, and I don't think I'm saying anything he wouldn't say if he were sitting right here. It's time to just take that next step and be more consistent with how you're playing it. But like, no, it's not a coincidence. Like they have needed to bring guys in to help.
And you see that
fill
when
that
you
spot.
change schemes a little bit. When you're trying to change schemes, you've got to recruit to it, which means sometimes you're going to be underpopulated somewhere when you make scheme changes where you're taking personnel off the field and you're putting it, like if they were still playing a 3 linebacker scheme, you've got a 1 and a 2 at every spot. We'd be still looking at it that way. But because they're not doing a 3 linebacker scheme, they've got the last 2 years, it's felt like they've had this ridiculous amount of depth in that linebacker room if they really wanted to use it. While with defensive back, when you're playing 5, that means you've got to bring in 5, 6, or 7 every single year. And this 2023 class was the first class where we got to see them do that successfully. Now, can they do that for a couple more cycles? And then maybe in 2 or 3 years, we'll be talking about the defensive back depth, especially at safety, being where it needs to be on a year-to-year basis, where they aren't having to offset it with transfers.
So I don't know that this is the goal of this podcast in spring football at every position to be making predictions, but we are attempting to get a sense of where things stand. So getting that sense, Nathan, who would you guess will be the starting nickel safety week 1 if you had to make that guess today, knowing that the battle goes on? We're not saying it is decided. We don't think Ohio State knows the answer to that right now. That's the whole point of this, especially when you have a guy who's in year 4 and has played 372 snaps, and you have a guy who's played 5 times that many snaps but never done it at Ohio State. That's 2 guys coming from very different positions in their careers who are trying to fight for this. But what's your sense right now, Nathan?
My sense is it is very up in the air, but I guess I would lean Cameron Martinez just because I feel like he may have that versatility that they're looking for and have already demonstrated that a little bit through practice and stuff throughout his career. It is worth mentioning, though, that at every spot where they've brought in either a new guy, whether that's at corner with Davis and Igbinosun or here at safety with Jahad-Carter, or there's a younger guy who it feels like is an heir apparent kind of guy like Sonny Styles. All those guys have been on the 2s so far, halfway through spring practice. For the most part, we rarely see those guys. The ones has deferred to tenure through the first 8 practices from what we've seen. So don't put a ton of stock in that yet, because that could just be sort of a function of what's the right word there? Politics isn't the right word, but just like the hierarchy that you use there. Like, this guy's been here longer, he gets first crack at it, and we'll see what happens between now and September 2nd.
But that also always hasn't been the case. So there is a balance there, because on either side of the ball, I mean, Justin Fields was working with the ones from day one. We know that. Jonah Jackson was working with the ones from day one when he got here. Tanner McAllister, was working with the ones from the moment we got here. So we've seen both, where a transfer can come in. And now context is always important, because those were, in two of those situations, there were older guys, and the other one's a first round NFL draft pick. But, we've seen transfers come in here and immediately, take on a number one role, and we haven't necessarily seen that here. And so, yes, things can change by fall camp, but it does feel like with Martinez's development, if I had to say of the new guys or the young guys who were on the twos, I might be most comfortable saying that Martinez can hold off the guy who's behind him right now, because we're talking about Josh Proctor holding off Sonny Styles, or Jordan Hancock maybe holding off Davison Igbinosun. And we know what this talent level is with Sonny Styles. While with Davison Igbinosun, I think we've seen enough flash that lets us know that it wouldn't be shocking if he ends up being a starter long term.
Cam Martinez is so interesting. I mean, I don't want to just keep repeating it, but again, I think so. One snap against Notre Dame, 39 against Arkansas State, 44 against Toledo. And that was the game that was kind of like, hey, because that was he and DeQuan Finn had played each other in high school. DeQuan Finn, the Toledo quarterback, and Cam Martinez, they had played each other, I think, in a state championship game even, when both were quarterbacks. And then one still is a quarterback, one isn't. One's in the MAC, one's at Ohio State. And that was like a big moment for him. And then it just, because of the injury or whatever else, did not continue. 3 snaps against Wisconsin, 6 against Michigan State, 22 against Iowa, 1 against Penn State, 15 Northwestern, 19 Indiana, 14 Maryland, 4 against Michigan, 7 against Georgia. He played 11 snaps in the games that mattered. And Tanner McAllister, in the end, played more than 500 snaps on defense last year. Cam Martinez played 175. Like, it was not close. So, Stephen, what you're kind of talking about is this idea of, right, so Nathan, you're saying you're kind of giving the edge to the guys who have been around a little bit right now in spring. I think that makes sense. Stephen, you're saying, well, at times it hasn't been that way. When Tanner McAllister got here, he was a one kind of from the jump, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he wasn't in. So do we think that the difference between the hierarchy where Tanner McAllister was ahead of Cam Martinez a year ago, and right now, as we stand, Cam Martinez is ahead, in quotes, of Jahad-Carter, is that mostly a function of Tanner McAllister had played for Jim Knowles, and Jim Knowles was like, this guy's coming with me, and he's my guy? Because the experience that Tanner McAllister and Jahad-Carter had at another school is similar. So if Tanner McAllister, his first spring was a 1, and Jahad-Carter right now is a 2, is that more about that he knew Knowles, or is it more about Cam Martinez is a year more progressed in his career and has earned a nod, right, over the transfer guy right now? I guess, Stephen, both factor in. Which do you think matters more?
Yeah, I think it's both, but for the sake of answering the question, if you're going to lean, if I had to give one side 51% and the other side 49%, I might give a little bit of a nod to last year being Tanner McAllister knew the defense, and it gave Jim Knowles somebody else who had a voice. Now, it's not the reason he kept it, but I do think it's the reason why he had the job in the beginning, is because Jim Knowles knew that Tanner McAllister knew what he was doing. So to apply that to the logic this time around, it's probably the same thing. He knows that Cameron Martinez knows what he's doing, and Jahad-Carter doesn't yet because he just got here.
What do you think, Nathan?
I think the fact that he was kind of a Knowles disciple, a Knowles right-hand man was a huge part of that last year too. But it may also have been that, like, I mean, we saw what McAllister did at Pro Day. Like, there was also maybe just a gap of talent there between what they thought they were getting from Martinez.
Tanner McAllister in 4 years at Oklahoma State played 1,849 defensive snaps before he got to Ohio State. Jahad-Carter in 3 years at Syracuse played 1,765. So they're both incredibly experienced dudes when they got here. I think the battle goes on. It's not going to be decided by the end of spring. Don't think it's going to be decided in the first week in August, and probably in the end, maybe a decent chance that both these guys factor in the defense. As you guys, Nathan, you said early on, maybe Jahad-Carter, if they figure, well, we're going to lean Cam Martinez more often than not in this slot role, maybe that opens up Jahad-Carter to bounce around a little bit because the guy's played practically 2,000 defensive snaps in his college career. So, okay, that's that position. We want to do that with all three safety spots. When we come back, we'll move to another one next on Buckeye Talk. All right, we don't want to make people wait forever to talk about Sonny Styles. I didn't make the headline of the pod yet. I'm assuming I'm going to put Sonny Styles' name in the headline. Why wouldn't I put Sonny Styles' name in the headline? If Sonny Styles went and got a salad and, got green peppers on it, I might put Sonny Styles likes green peppers in the headline of a podcast because he's a little bit of a magic name. Nathan, what is the battle that Sonny Styles is in right now? This is the Sonny Styles position. What's he playing? Who's he going against? How do we think this is going in the spring? And then we'll get to next of how we think it'll shape up in the fall. But what did you guys see from him and his competition on Saturday?
Right. So right now he is playing Bandit. He is playing Bandit with the twos. And there was a quote from Jim Knowles, though, that I thought, and I forgot to go grab it before we started, so give me 1 second. But there was one that I thought maybe crystallized some of this for me, because he said something along the lines of they have him working at Bandit because okay, here it goes. We're going to get him in, but I think when you start out, you have to establish depth. You've got to establish competition. We need to be better as a defense, and I think everybody needs to feel like competition. So having Sonny there, Bandit, right now establishes a nice competition with him and Lathan. And then ultimately, you're right. We think they both can play, and then it's my job to find a way to get them both on the field. So right now, they are competing at Bandit. I think if you were to poll everybody who covers this team and said, what's the most likely outcome in the safety room, they would say that both those guys are starters on September 2nd. So now it's just a matter of like, well, are those guys competing, or if they're both going to end up at, is it right now the competition to see which one would best be like a dominant guy at Bandit, so you'd move the other guy to adjuster, or the guy who would most easily move to adjuster? I don't know. But I don't know that the competition is that in the end result of this is that one of those two guys isn't playing very much.
So there's a YouTube video that we did last week where I got this exactly backwards. And I was like, Sonny Styles is the adjuster. So can you guys go delete that?
He might well be.
That's what you do on the internet.
Yeah, he might
if
be.
you say something on the internet, you just delete it. Isn't that how that works on the internet? There's no hard copy. Just go delete it.
Sometimes you just leave it too.
No.
I've seen.
I think you could delete it. I think this might be a delete. So does this make sense? Does this make sense? Steven, does this make sense?
So, yes and no. Sonny Styles played a similar role to the adjuster in high school, and for what it means. So he could do that. If they really wanted to start him and Lathan and put Lathan at the band, keep Lathan at that Bandit role, Sonny Styles has the athleticism to play the adjuster role. And he played at a pretty good high school, Pinkerton Central. They compete for state championships in Division I Ohio high school football. So that's a big deal. But also, Lathan Ransom could also play the adjuster position and showed us last year he could play Bandit. So this is like the one tandem where it feels like it could be interchangeable. But I think that part of trying this stuff out is Sonny and the athleticism that he is, but also I think they just like Lathan Ransom as a weapon in the same as a safety, in the same way they really just liked Tommy Eichenberg as a weapon at middle linebacker. And even if none of us saw it, I mean, Tommy Eichenberg ends up being a borderline All-American guy. So because I'm bringing Lathan into this conversation because it matters. He was talking about how he's up to 205, which is the heaviest he's ever played at in his life. And watching him on Saturday, they had one play where it was like a goal line drill. Nathan remembers what I'm talking about. They sent Lathan Ransom on a blitz, and he flew like a bat out of hell and got to the quarterback before they could even get a ball exchange going off. And it's that type of stuff, I think, is what they want to do with Lathan Ransom, because they figured out something with him. We saw it a little bit last year with the pump blocks, and then they would send them on some safety blitzes ever so often. I think Jim Knowles has unlocked something with Lathan Ransom that, as much as we want to talk about, what Josh Proctor might be able to do at Bandit, what Sonny Styles might be able to do at Bandit, he might be able to send Lathan Ransom as a weapon the same way he did with Tommy Eichenberg. And I think it's playing a role into where everybody else is playing in that safety room right now.
So we've talked about stapling safeties together on this podcast in the past. So then the idea is we love what Lathan Ransom can do there. We love what Sonny Styles can do there. They're going to staple them together in September and have them play, like maybe not even a staple, maybe more like a three-legged race, right? You just get a gunny sack, they put the middle leg in, and now all of a sudden here come these two athletic guys. And then the adjuster, well, someone will play the adjuster, that's fine. So the question is, do we think, so let's take a poll here on Buckeye Talk. Nathan, we'll start with you. Stephen, we'll go to you. What do you believe the best position in a vacuum, the best position for Sonny Styles in this defense and the best position for Lathan Ransom in this defense, Nathan? In a vacuum, if nobody else existed and you were just starting with them, the best thing for them and the way they would best help this team.
Well, I think the best position for them in a vacuum might be Bandit for both of them, which is where they're both playing right now.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Stephen?
I think I agree with that.
Okay, so in a world where Perry Eliano, the safeties coach, said we want to streamline things for Sonny Styles. And so the way they're streamlining things right now is by letting him play the position where he best fits, but where he is blocked by an older player that fits it just as well. I guess my question is this. The thing where I said, does this make sense 9 times 5 minutes ago? If you think they're the two best safeties and one of the guys has a lot of reps and one guy doesn't, does it make sense to spend the spring having him get these reps in the same place? Or should you be having one of them get reps in the other spot if you think there's a decent likelihood that in the end they're going to be on the field together? You know what I mean, Nathan? Right? You know what I mean?
I know I know what you mean, and I don't believe that it has been exclusive as to where they have played this spring. That's part of it. The other part of it is I'm hesitant to use words like blocked on April 3rd. I just am, because we're halfway through spring. There's an instructional process that's going on. So I hear what you're saying. I think it's a point worth making. I think there's also none of this is happening in a vacuum. You do still have Josh Proctor who exists. So you want to make sure you take your last look or see if there is something there with Josh Proctor. And what if there is? What if he is a better adjuster than either of those two guys are adjusters? I think some of this is due diligence of the evaluation here and making sure you get this right, because safety was not right at the end of last year. Safety was very exposed in those last 2 games.
I think Sonny Styles is going through his first spring as a college football player, so they're putting him where they think he's maximized best, and just to the point you just made, the teaching, they're just teaching Sonny Styles, and they're just teaching people. And I think when we get to fall camp, things could potentially look very different when it's no longer just about teaching and about who are our best guys. Because I do think that Lathan and Sonny are probably their best 2 safeties, but that's not a conversation they have to necessarily be worried about having in April. We're recording this April 3rd. This could be on April 2nd, April 4th. That's not a conversation they have to be worried about now the same way they have to be worried about August 4th.
And the other thing is, the reason Jim Knowles calls this the adjuster is because you have on-field responsibilities with helping align this defense snap to snap. And that is probably a bigger, now I'm going to use the word a different way, adjustment for an 18-year-old than it is for someone who's been around 3-4 years in this program.
So when you look at Lathan Ransom on PFF and his snaps from last year, by their count, he was the deep safety, 190 snaps. He was in the box, so deep. So he was the adjuster, 190 snaps. He's more the Bandit, 266 snaps, and they had him as just playing sort of the slot for 145 snaps. So that's a guy who did play multiple positions. Who knows what that means?
Yeah, some of those snap counts on positional stuff is weird.
Gets a little hinky. Yeah. So, but he did move around. And you have to have flexibility. And again, you got to have a guy lined up, and then, you want to give the quarterback a different look, and you change your positioning right before the snap and that kind of thing. In the end, so I guess what I thought maybe we would try to do in this podcast is like, hey, maybe the battle lines have been drawn a little bit this spring at these safety positions. It's going to be this guy or this guy. It's going to be this guy or this guy. That's going to be this guy or this guy. And I don't think we can do that because it's like, Nathan, it's not really a battle between Sonny Styles and Lathan Ransom to start at Bandit, where in the end, one is a 1 and one is a 2 at Bandit. That is not really what we think the outcome of this will be. Maybe, right?
That just seems like the weirdest outcome. I will say, and I know that this is Josh Proctor is kind of a polarizing name for our texters, for our listeners. I understand that. He was playing really well before he got...
Proctor. Don't go too far into Proctor because we're going to get to the adjuster position.
I'm just saying that don't rule out that the Proctor that was showing up early in 2021 before he got hurt can be around, and that does affect this. That there's a better version of Josh Proctor than we saw last year, but I don't want to go too far down that line. But yeah, that's the only thing that would maybe happen here that would really wonk this up. But otherwise, you would assume that Lathan Ransom is the most proven of the safeties in this room, I would argue, and Styles has the highest ceiling of the safeties in this room, I would argue. He was an interesting conversation last week, you try to get a vibe from some of these guys, and we haven't had an extended chance to talk to Sonny Styles since he got to campus. I tried to talk to him in Atlanta, and it was pretty brief. But I don't know, he just seemed like a guy who there was like no agitation. He just seemed like very smooth, like very in control of the moment when we talked to him last week. Not in a way that maybe other guys, I don't know, not that other guys out there seem very, very nervous or bothered, but you just got a vibe from him a little bit. Like he kind of knows maybe what's going on and he's not in a hurry.
He acts older than his age. And that's the result of being 2 years younger than Jack and his brother, but hanging around those guys his whole life.
So the vibe from study, because we do want to make sure we get into this. Did Sonny talk about like what he thinks he does best, how he best fits here, what he needs to get better at? Like does he think he's more of a bandit than an adjuster? Or like was there much positional discussion, Nathan?
Not significantly, and when it does come up, it's a lot of I'll play where they want me to play, that sort of thing. What his overarching theme though, which is I think what you like to hear from a young player is do your job. Like that's what I have to do. This spring is about learning how to do your job. The positional responsibilities are about doing your job. The safeties didn't do their job well enough the last couple games of last season. They're trying to find somebody who will go out there and do their job and replicate it over and over again.
And then the Lathan Ransom side of things, I would say if you put together a highlight package for this Ohio State defense from a year ago of a guy's 7 best plays of the season, I would think maybe the Lathan Ransom highlight package would stack up with anybody on the defense. But then also maybe if you put together a package of like 7 plays that didn't go that well for a guy, Lathan Ransom would have some plays that would show up in a package like that as well. Like how did Lathan Ransom express himself in interviews of like where he thinks he is? Again, the thing that happened, it's April. This is what we talk about. We thought we had a handle on the safeties a year ago. And then Josh Proctor missed a tackle on the first play of the season, and that was it. Everything in the safety room changed, and basically Lathan Ransom took Josh Proctor's job. Lathan Ransom was not a starter to begin last season. And by the end of the year, he was like 5th on the defense in snaps. So it doesn't mean we're not going to, like I've said, it's always one of those things. It's like, why do you guys get so far ahead? It's like, we could just shut down the pod and say, we'll see you in September. And everything else is, well, only time will tell. Well, that's not what you do. It's fun to talk about football. But where is Lathan? Like, a year ago, Jim Knowles was amazed by Lathan Ransom's recovery from his injury and like, man, I want to see what a healthy version of this guy looks like. And then he wound up leaning on him a lot. Lathan Ransom is in a very different place now, Steven. Where's his head at?
Yeah, it's Lathan Ransom's entire career has been doing things that nobody was expecting him to be doing since he showed up. And he pointed that out a little bit. He said this is his second winter. And I didn't think about that until you break it down. He didn't early enroll as a 2020 guy, but even if he had of, I mean, COVID. So he didn't get here to the fall. And then we get to the Big Ten championship game that year, and he's playing slot corner all of a sudden in the Big Ten championship game, and then the Sugar Bowl and the national championship game, he's playing real snaps. And then he's kind of in and out his entire 2021 year, and then breaks his leg, comes back earlier than maybe anybody expected him to. And then as you just pointed out, he goes from this dude where it's like Jim Knowles is impressed with what he's doing, but as a second string guy, to Josh Proctor misses a tackle. And now Lathan Ransom's one of the best defensive players on the team all year. And then obviously we saw what happened in the Georgia game. So this is his second full offseason as an Ohio State football player, and it's led him to just be more comfortable. He said he felt rushed. This was his exact quote. I felt a little rushed last year, which can happen when you work your way back from an injury and then you just get thrown out there in the Notre Dame game. And then now I get time to get my body to feel 100% and my mind to be 100%. And then get out there and just with the guys get a lot of reps. So it feels like for him, they're using him in different ways, but also he's just having a very normal offseason for his first time where he knows where his role is going to be. And what does that mean in year 4 of him when he's already gotten this many reps, when he's not worried about an injury, he's not replacing somebody in the starting lineup one snap into the game. It's just Lathan Ransom's probably going to be a starter, whether it's Adjuster or Bandit, and he's just getting a lot of reps right now.
Lathan Ransom, 614 defensive snaps last year. Only Ronnie Hickman, Tommy Eichenberg, and Steele Chambers had more. Nathan, if we were playing like predict the safety room in general, is Lathan Ransom as a starter the surest thing in the safety room right now? Maybe not exactly 100% sure which position, but like Lathan Ransom is going to start, just like Tommy Eichenberg is going to start, and just like JT Tuimoloau is going to start. Is that where Lathan Ransom is? He's a sure thing. Maybe the specifics will change, but he's definitely going to be one of the 11.
He's not a sure thing like those two guys are sure things. He's not a sure thing like Eichenberg is a sure thing. But of the safeties, I'd think he's the surest bet, yes.
Well, I don't know. I might say he is. I, in terms of production, maybe not be, but as far as like, I'm quite confident that he'll be out there the first snap of the game. Yeah, I think he's pretty up there with what JT, Tommy, and Steele are at this point, and Denzel Burke.
If we got to a world where when they take the field in the opener, it's Josh Proctor and Sonny Styles, we would be what, Nathan? We would be, or we would be like, what? Like, try to end with the inflection of your voice. Is it a huh, or is it a what, or like somewhere in between?
We've been doing this a while now. It's easy to get jaded. To be more like a what was that?
Oh yeah, no, like okay, no, that's pretty good. Steven, what would your noise be if like we're sitting there? We got okay. Here they come. Here comes Sonny Styles. Here comes Josh Proctor, and Lathan Ransom's on the side clapping his hands. The sound you would make would be.
I think my eyes would get wide, and I'd go well then, and then I'd grab my binoculars and start looking for the tent to see if anything happened to him pregame.
Well then, binoculars, text.
Yes.
And we'd write it down. We'd talk about it in the podcast afterward. Okay. So that's where we are at that position. In the end, the idea of this is probably the best position for both. Let them play their best position, see how it works out. Do you think maybe that Nathan, Jim Knowles is using the spring to figure out who the best Bandit is, and then the guy who's the second best Bandit then goes into the adjuster battle in August? Or do you think we could go through multiple weeks of August camp where as we watch and as we talk, Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles are the two guys at Bandit, and that continues, and none of them are getting as many adjuster snaps? And again, Bandit's like strong safety, adjusters like free safety.
It's weird to look at it that way because adjuster, again, just seems like such an important job in getting the defense set up. And to think of it as being like where the leftover guy would go is odd. I mean, especially because, but at the same time, Ronnie Hickman was basically the bullet, RIP, in 2021, and then became the adjuster last season. So he had more of a bandit-like role before and then moved to adjuster. So I don't know. I actually don't know how to characterize exactly what they're doing with that. Some of this may just be that it's a guy who is so young that you know that you can let him work with the twos and come along at that pace and then make your big decisions later.
I think there is something to that, though, because, I mean, if we're going to look at adjuster and bandit the same way we look at Mike and Will, right? Where one is, I mean, the Will's job is to see ball, get ball a lot of the times, while Mike linebacker, you do have responsibilities. So it might take a little bit longer to find some trust in that. So if you spend this time just figuring out who your best playmaker is, who your best see ball, get ball guy is, it's not completely the same. But if you're spending the spring figuring out who's the guy I can just turn into a weapon and see the ball, go get the ball, that's the bandit. And you have 9 months to develop a guy to be the guy who has to be the mind out there, that would actually make sense to me.
Do we think that they would be more likely to put the older guy at adjuster? That if in the end they want Styles and Ransom on the field together, you'd put the older guy at adjuster because you don't want to necessarily put that on Sonny right away? Or would that not be a huge consideration?
It's probably some consideration. But I think it's also possible that Styles is just that good. That you've got to get him on the field, and that his combination that he has right now, because I mean he's got like such length out there, but he's not like thick. You know, he's a big safety, but isn't thick the way that like a Court Williams is. It's a different kind of body type. I think it would fit fine in a more free ranging, need to cover a lot of ground situation. But they also did really like what he did in the Georgia game. So in that specific role, that would make you think that maybe they like what he could do locking down players like that in Bandit. So I don't know. I think I think the battle there is just to be one of the top two safeties. Prove yourself as being of the two best safeties, because I don't think they're going to put a guy who is their second best safety, whoever it is, on the bench just because.
Okay, so we'll talk about that other safety spot. The battle there at adjuster. We'll do that next on Buckeye Talk. Doug, Nathan, and Steven, if you'll be a tech subscriber, 614-350-3315. Cleveland.com/OSU. We invite you to go read our stuff there. So then that means right now at adjuster, it's Josh Proctor as a 6th-year guy and Kai Stokes, who is a 2nd-year guy, just like Sonny Styles. A lot of reason to be optimistic, maybe not quite as intense optimism as there is with Sonny Styles, but a guy that a lot of people like. What do we think, Nathan, of this battle right now? Josh Proctor has certainly been with the ones more often than not. How do we think this shapes up?
I've been asking myself that a lot this spring as I just watch them play this defense. Like, what is the long-term goal, and what are they expecting to get out of Josh Proctor, which was sort of this semi-unexpected situation to have him back. He said at one point in his own mind it was 50-50 whether he was going to be back at Ohio State this year. And we had all sort of started envisioning a very intriguing safety situation this year for Ohio State that didn't necessarily involve Josh Proctor. So this was more or less what he was doing before he got hurt in 2021. He had become the free safety in what was still a single high system. And he seems to think that that is the place where he fits best, even though we've long speculated that there are other reasons why he might fit better just with his physicality and stuff, playing a spot more like Bandit. So he's getting every chance right now to prove that he is one of the two best safeties on this team. I still think that the long-term outcome is someone like Sonny Styles and Lathan Ransom emerging and being the most likely guys to start for this team this fall. But Proctor deserves some respect for what he was doing before he got hurt. And I think they're giving him that respect right now. I think he's getting every chance to prove himself. We've seen some good things from him in practice. We also saw they were doing a tackle thing before at the start of scrimmage on Saturday, and he was not doing great in there. And Periolano kind of pulled him off and was getting into him a little bit, I thought. So, Jim Knowles said something like this is it for him, like this is his last chance, and that's not like a threat that he's putting out to somebody. It's just like it's his 6th year. Like, this is it. This is the last time he gets to do this, and So he's on the clock a little bit in a way that some of these other guys aren't. So it's a matter of like, is it there? Did he have it and have it just slip away because of the injury, and he can get it back this spring and kind of prove himself?
This is a tough one. This is among maybe the more unusual careers that I think I've covered at Ohio State, in that you're talking about a guy who is back for a sixth season, career defensive snaps, 2018, 3, 2019, 129, 2020, 357. That's a lot in that year. 2021, 84, which is basically, I think he might have played every single snap that defense had until he got hurt. I think it was 63 in the opener against Minnesota, and then in 21 against Oregon, and he gets hurt on that 21st snap, and that's the end of his season. And then 192 last year, which includes starting against Notre Dame and playing only 5 snaps against Notre Dame. He plays 38 against Arkansas State, 53 against Wisconsin, 40 against Rutgers. He's still in the mix in the first half of the season. And then the second half of the season, he plays like 60 snaps total. And he does not play on defense against Michigan or Georgia. And he's back. And he was talking about the idea of, I've got to get out of my own way. I've got to make sure I'm handling stuff with my nutrition and just everything in my life. I've got to give myself the best opportunity. I don't know, Stephen. It's hard. I think you give a guy credit for sticking around for this, but it feels like to some degree we're having a potential discussion with Josh Proctor when he is in his 6th year of college football and he's 24 years old, and we're still talking about what he could be. And that's just a tough place to be. It's not that, I don't know that anyone's doubting Josh Proctor, but at some point it's like, if you're waiting for something that you haven't seen, how much can you wait? Yes, an injury factored into his career, but last year it kind of wasn't. So I don't know, Stephen, like how do you view Josh Proctor running with the ones as much as he has this spring? Do you view it with like a grain of salt, skepticism? Do you just think, hey, man, I think this guy could start? What do you think?
I think the idea of Josh Proctor has haunted this podcast since the moment I showed up here, and I think our texters are tired of it. I think he's just the old guy, and they're, as Nathan said, they're giving him every opportunity. And we've seen this before with guys, where they've given guys every opportunity in the spring to go get it. And it's either going to happen for you or not, but you can't say it's because you didn't have enough reps, because you're going to get enough reps. The problem is, what's the best case scenario here for Josh Proctor in a world where we think Sonny Styles is kind of like that? At best, he's the 3rd best safety still, because if we all can sit here and feel like Lathan Ransom and Sonny Styles will probably long-term be the 2 starting safeties, then at best he's 3rd. I'm one of those high safety guys. But then also, Kai Stokes flashed some things when he's gotten some opportunities. And, kudos to Kai Stokes. He has been latched on to Josh Proctor like a lost puppy since he got here. They work out together. They're big brother. It's literally a big brother, little brother relationship. And so it's, is Kai Stokes still coming along as a guy who right now is a 2nd string adjuster? And does it get to a point where midway through the year or even in fall camp, you feel like Kai Stokes is doing enough that he's your 3rd best safety? So I just don't know what best case scenario Josh Proctor looks like and what the impact is, which is unfortunate because if he doesn't break his leg against Oregon, he's probably getting ready for his 2nd NFL season right now. And that's a very vastly different outcome for his life than what's actually ended up happening here.
And Doug, it is such a weird career because go back to 2020, that's actually more like 600 snaps because that's the COVID year and that was only 8 games. Right. So if you extrapolate it over a full season, it's more. But that was actually an underwhelming year for him because he didn't open the season with the job. It was Marcus Hooker's job for a big portion of that season. So that was like the first indication we had that like, oh, is he just behind? Is something like, why didn't that happen? And in 2021, it did look like it was happening, and then the injury happens, and then that throws everything off. So I don't know. You're right. It is a hard one, and I've been trying to wrap my head around which way I think this is going since the start of the spring. And there's a world where I could see maybe like a Damon Arnett like trajectory here, where it's somebody who we think is maybe was overexposed a little bit and isn't as good as they are, but then that last year it comes together in a way that it had never come together before. I'm not saying he's going to be a first-round pick, which Arnett shouldn't have been, but like I remember him talking about like how he had refocused himself going into his senior year, had some life circumstances that changed his perspective on things, and you got the best version of him, and it made that defense better. Or is it that there is just this guy waiting in the wings, and once they feel like he can be unleashed, then on their timetable, not anybody else's, that's going to not have a starting spot for Proctor. I don't know yet.
I understand fans or texters or listeners being not what we've kind of talked through every angle of Josh Proctor in our time here. And you get hyped up for a guy and you get excited and that doesn't happen. And so it's like, okay, he is a very nice young man. He is just such a pleasant guy, very upbeat for all the things that have maybe not gone as he would have hoped or expected at Ohio State. And I really enjoyed speaking with him last week and getting his perspective on things. I was saying, it feels like you're really philosophical about this stuff, that, why you're here, and that it was 50-50 of whether you were going to stay. And that he said one of the reasons he wanted to stay is to sort of help young guys out and do that kind of thing. But then I could very specifically remember, with my terrible, terrible memory, walking away a year ago from a spring conversation with Josh Proctor, having the exact same feeling of like, oh, he's healthy. Okay, he had that, his season blew up, but now he's going to be back healthy. Here we go. This is what he's been waiting for. And then he just got beat out by a guy who also was coming off an even more recent serious leg injury and then got back quick and then just took his snaps. So there's nothing like he's just been beat. He just got beat out by Lathan Ransom took his snaps last year. That's all it is. Ronnie Hickman was going to be Ronnie Hickman. And then there was and Tyner McAllister and Cam Martinez were going to do the nickel safety thing. Neither Ransom nor Proctor were going to be involved there. And then Lathan Ransom just took his snaps. And then Lathan Ransom's still here. So that's not, there's no negative around Josh Proctor. That's the thing. Sometimes you end up having a conversation about somebody. It's like, hey, what's up? What's up is this guy's a good football player who's trying his hardest. And it just, from circumstances, some he could not control, some that he could. Sometimes just get beat out. But as we're trying to assess what it means for this Ohio State safety room, A, he's competing with a younger guy in Kai Stokes that a lot of people have high hopes for. And B, we just had the whole Lathan Ransom, Sonny Styles conversation, which is really more immediate. If we said, if this was just Proctor Stokes head to head, how do you think this is going to shake out? Would we feel decent about the chances of Josh Proctor being the guy, at least to start the season, Stephen, if that was the only conversation?
Yeah, I would feel intrigued because then, I don't know if I would be so hell-bent on he's the older guy. That's the only reason why he's with the ones. I think it would be because he's the older guy. That's why he's with the ones, but also maybe Kai Stokes is not ready yet. You can view it that way. But when there's the extra variables, the more variables you have, the more you have to lean on. He's the older guy. That's why he's with the ones. In a way that Nathan brought up Damon Arnett. I mean, there also wasn't a Sonny Styles behind Damon Arnett in 2019. Right? There wasn't a 5-star second-year guy where it's like maybe he can take his snaps. So it was probably a good thing that, one, it was, I think the best way to maybe comparison for where Kai Stokes is right now is maybe what Sevyn Banks was at that point, where there was still some hope in the guy that even if he was lower rated, you thought there was maybe something there, but he wasn't ready yet. While Damon Arnett, something just clicked in his head that allowed him to have the type of season that made the Raiders think for whatever reason he was a first-round draft pick. It's not necessarily the same thing when you add in, if Jaheim Singletary had been in that 2020 to 2019 room with Damon Arnett and Jeff Okudah and was coming to his second year.
But it's not that.
Yeah.
But it's not only a Proctor Stokes discussion, as we talked about previously. It's just hard, Nathan. The last 7 games last year, second half of the year, Josh Proctor played 38 defensive snaps. And so to look and see what's going to drastically change, what's he going to do differently in a big way when the guy who took his snaps is still there, when a 5-star guy who's one of the best secondary recruits that Ohio State's had in the last decade, is right there. How's that going to shake out? Is it going to shake out in a very different way for Josh Proctor? It's just probably not where our lean is right now. And he's running with the ones, but I don't know. I think not just us, if you went through the beat and said, do you think Josh Proctor is a starter in September? Are we thinking maybe not a lot of people would say yes?
Right. That's what I said earlier. Was I think if you did a survey, I think that the guys who would be assumed to be the top two would be Styles and Ransom. And, I think we all feel for Proctor or anyone who has an injury that severe. And that absolutely, if you go back to last spring, remember Jim Knowles, when he was asked about Josh Proctor being kind of like, I haven't seen him play. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, some of the film I saw looked good, but like, he's not playing right now. His comeback from the leg injury turned out to be a bigger detriment to him getting on the field and having the season he wanted last year than Lathan Ransom, whose leg injury was much more recent. A very similar injury, big time leg break, and was still able to come back and took his job basically. So that's the other thing that has made this tough, is that Ransom and him being so aligned from an injury standpoint, but Ransom still, either by the way that he attacked the comeback from that, or then just the way he was able to play, probably a combination of both, was the one who gained the favor of the coaching staff last year.
And then Josh Proctor was talking about the idea, like, he's been back and forth. So now he's back at adjuster when last year he was at Bandit, when he's been at different things through. And so he's like, okay, well, and people ask him, hey, by the way, this is the first time you've had the same defensive coordinator in back-to-back years, your entire career at Ohio State, which is a thing, right? You go back long enough. It's been carried it stick. Yeah, I mean, it applies to everybody.
He had Carey for 2 years, though. But yeah, I see what you're getting
But Carey's second year only lasted 2 games.
Yeah, and that first year was like 6 games. So, that's fair.
So, I mean, it's been odd. But I do think in the end, first of all, there are alien abductions. And so the idea, you have to talk about who's going to be the starter, and then things happen. If this is how this wraps up for Josh Proctor, where to start the season, as a 24-year-old, 6th-year guy who maybe people didn't expect to be at Ohio State. If he is their third safety among the 2 deep spots, right? Okay, we're going to start Ransom and Styles, but if anything happens to either of them, Proctor's the next guy up, both spots, or however we would have to do it, right? We'll drop somebody down. If something happens at adjuster, Proctor's up. If something happens at Bandit, maybe the guy who's the starting adjuster moves to Bandit and Proctor's the adjuster, whatever it is. If that's your role, and this is a team that is trying to win a national championship, this is a team that has you go through a long season, things happen. I don't know, Stephen, there's almost a part of me, I could see us being here and then that's when Josh Proctor had to come into the Penn State game in the middle of the second quarter and play 37 snaps and really play pretty darn well and help this team win a game they had to win, because something happened to one of the starters. And then when they look to say who's on the second team, it's this guy who's been around the block. That is not, for his NFL draft prospects, it might not be what he wants to be. That's a pretty good guy to have in reserve, Stephen. And we see stories like that unfold all the time.
And you talk about Jennifer, like, he might still go test well next spring and end up getting drafted anyway because some team takes a flyer on him in like the 6th round. But as you were saying that, I'm thinking the safeties version of Justin Hilliard. Former top 100 recruit, highly rated dude who injuries with him never really worked out here. But whether it's the 2019 Wisconsin game, either game, or it's in 2020 when he gets thrown out there in the Big Ten championship game, when he had his moments, he made plays that mattered for this Ohio State team. And I could see that for Josh. They play the right team where, because something happened, or they're in a situation where Josh is just like kind of out there playing a different role. And maybe his role is actually what Sonny Styles' role was against Georgia. That's his role now that Sonny's more of a vital part of what this defense is. And it's like, against Georgia in a playoff game, Josh Proctor had 6 tackles and 2 brass breakups. And everybody else around the country is like, he has not done anything all year. He's played 75 snaps. But in this game, he made 3 or 4 plays for why Ohio State's going to the national championship game. I could see that because the talent is still there. It's just
unfortunately, circumstances have never allowed it for us to see it other than these little sprinkles.
Good teams have good twos.
Yeah.
So if that Nathan is in the end of what happens here, he's running with the ones this spring. He's competing. He's getting an opportunity. But good teams have good twos. And if that's what you say, hey, what's your second team secondary look like? Let us show you this guy. Oh, okay. No, that's pretty good. That matters. And that might be what his final role is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a realistic goal for every position group every year to think that it has starters too deep at every spot. But we've been talking about safety like maybe it does, and Proctor's a part of that reason. And now you start talking about, go back to our first segment, is Jahad-Carter hurt more than it looked like on Saturday, and how long might he have to be out? And then if Josh Proctor weren't here, you're not really talking about the safety group that way anymore. You're still talking about it like there being some like high potential there, but maybe also being kind of thin. So I think there's an important role, and it goes back to what you were saying before, just about him as a guy, because I've had those conversations with him too, talking about the blood in the emergency room after he broke his leg or whatever, and he's kind of just got a smile on his face the whole time, like some unpleasant conversations. And there's a certain attitude that I think would have to be present in a guy to be the right kind of fit here. If he can win a starting job, and he's the best version of Josh Proctor we've ever seen, then that's good for Ohio State too, by the way. But if he does get passed up, he might have the right kind of attitude to still be able to play this out and be an asset to the team.
All right, that'll wrap up our safety conversation. We are getting 2 more position groups this week, running backs and tight ends. Look for podcasts on them later in the week. Make sure you're reading cleveland.com/OSU. But for now, for Stephen Means and Nathan Baird, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Buckeye Talk.